Hello, YouTube, and welcome to The Real Siberius. On this episode, I want to talk about Mark Price, the OK Kid. I wasn't even a Cavaliers fan. In fact, I hated the Cavs. But he's one of those players that, regardless of the fact that I didn't like his team and I always wanted them to lose, you just have to respect him. I mean, the man shot 47, 40, 90 for his career. That's almost 50, 40, 90 for his career. That's just insane. It pains me that Mark Price's name is never mentioned. It's never brought up. It's not held in the reverence that it should be. He's a 4-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, 2-time three-point contest winner, and the inventor of splitting the pick and roll. I think that's all you could know about him, and that's enough. Him and Brad Daugherty on the pick and roll was insane. Almost impossible to guard. I personally think that Mark Price is a better shooter than Curry, and you can hate me if you want, but I think it's true, and the reason why I think it's true is because Mark Price played in an era with stouter defense, and he was still able to get it done. I don't know if you put Curry back in the 80s and 90s, if he would be as effective, but I don't deal with would'ves, could'ves, or should'ves. It's, do you get it done in your era? And so in that regard, I suppose that Steph Curry is getting it done. I would just be curious to see, could you still do it in the era with hand checking and with no 3-second rule? When I do hear Mark Price's name, I do hear people come at him a little bit for his defense, and he absolutely was not an elite defender without question, but his defensive rating was 108.7, which is pretty decent. I think in this era, he'd be considered an elite defender, which is a little bit sad, but I don't think he was a liability on defense. Anyway, I have a few clips here of players talking about Mark Price, so let's get into that.
Can I just mention one guy's name who I think is one of the most underrated players of our era, who nobody ever talks about anymore, is Mark Price. He was so good. You remember how
hardest
good?
to check on the pick and roll. He was splitting the pick and roll.
Man.
He created the split.
Yes.
Nobody was
invented the
splitting pick
split.
and rolls.
As a matter of fact, we have an entire segment devoted to more of the under the radar
I thought you
kind of
said
guys
Mark
in the
Price.
backcourt.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
A little bit like Steve Nash in that he was the best shooting point guard of his day. Could shoot any shot. You know, as Kenny said, he invented splitting the pick and roll, and the reason it was effective was because he could shoot the runner in the lane, but he could stop on a dime in transition and shoot from three. Mark was much more athletic than people gave him credit for. He was fast, he was strong, and when he ran pick and roll with Brad Daugherty, it was a nightmare to defend.
I'm going to talk to you about Mark Price. Mark Price, off the pick and roll, one of the greatest shooters I've ever seen in all game. Now, there's a thing we call 50, 40, 90. Guy shoots 50% from the field, 40% from the three, 90 from the line. That was Mark Price back then. Mark Price can come off screens, he can catch it, he can shoot it, but then he was fast and he was quick and he could run all day. And then there's this thing now where they split the screen. But Mark Price was coming off and he was splitting the screen and then he's pulling up, popping, pop, from the three-point line.
What I like about most NBA legends is they give respect where it's due. Game respects game. And what Open Court said about Mark Price, what Isaiah Thomas said about Mark Price, I really couldn't agree with more. I just think he was an innovator and quite possibly one of the best shooters of all time, without question. He was an absolute professional and put in the work, and you just have to respect that. So I hope, if you're not familiar with Mark Price, that you do some research. I was going to say you watch some of his games, you watch some of his highlights, because there's a lot to learn from his game, from his approach to the game. And I genuinely hope that he's not a player that's forgotten, because that would genuinely make me sad. He's just such a great player, and I think the memory of great players needs to be preserved. Just because he hasn't played in a while and because he wasn't an NBA champion doesn't mean he deserves to be overlooked and overshadowed. He's without question an underrated player, and that needs to be valued. So anyway, that's the end of the video. If you made it to the end, I certainly appreciate it. If you have not done so, please like and subscribe. As always, I want to give a shout out to the content creators that continue to inspire me to make these videos. Uncommon Sense, Angry Old Hoops, Self-Researched NBA Facts, 93Zay, Sports and Fitness Rants, Uncut Hoops, Scap Attack, Speam Engine, In Your Face Hoops, Eddie TV, King Speech Row, Goatcast Hoops. I always appreciate your guys' perspective, your takes, and your humor. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.